Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I am taking part in a brand new hop. It's the Crazy Craft Obsession Rainbow Magic YouTube and Instagram hop. In this hop, we're going to be making monochromatic layouts. Each month we'll be making a layout using a different color of the rainbow. So this month the color that we're using is yellow. I have to admit that I don't often make monochromatic layouts, and I really loved this particular hop, and I was excited to join it because I felt that it would challenge me to make layouts that would have only one color in them, and I like to be pushed out of my comfort zone every now and then. I'm starting off with a mixed media background. I'm using a gessoed piece of white cardstock, and I'm using a number of stamps that are in my stash. The first stamp that I used was a Prima stamp that has type, and then I'm using a Studio G stamp. I love this line of circles, so I'm putting some of them on the top and the bottom of where I'm going to have my photo, and I'm also adding some that go across the page, and I'm attempting to use my T-square to line them up, but they still came out a little bit crooked, but that's okay. I feel like in a mixed media background, it's okay to have some imperfections, or maybe lots of imperfections. I also added some dots to the background using a Stampin' Up stamp, and sorry, I did that off camera. Now that I have some stamping in the background, I'm adding some sprays using the packaging technique. I use 4 different colors of yellow that were in my stash. 3 of them are Tattered Angels Glimmer Mists. They're called Sunlight, Queen's Gold, and Summer Glow. And then I used a Tattered Angels Simply Sheer spray. That's the same as the other sprays, except that it doesn't have any shimmer in it. And that one is called Saffron. After I added a few sprays, I decided to go back in with a little bit more stamping. I found this stamp in my stash. It's loose circles. It almost looks like thread, and I thought this would look nice in just a couple of places on the layout. I'm doing all of my stamping using a Staz On Ink in jet black. I am using an archival ink because I know that I'm going to be layering sprays and then doing more stamping, and I don't want the stamping to run. So this type of ink will stay put even when I put liquid on top of it. Now I'm using one of my most used stamp sets. This is from a Tim Holtz set called Faded Type. It's mainly letters, but I often use these numbers. I just think they're a great size. I just really like the stamp, and so I stamped it in a couple of places on the layout. And usually when I use a stamp more than once on the same layout, I try to vary the amount of pressure I put on it. That way it'll look a little different in all of the areas that I put it in. I keep placing my photo back on top of the stamped area. I just want to make sure that I have enough stamping, but not too much stamping. Once again, I'm going back in with more of the sprays. I'm not really sure what I'm going to add on top of this background at this point, so I'm not sure how much color I should add in the background. I want to add some color, and I thought that if I don't add too much color, I at least want to make the color interesting, so I like to do that by using different shades of the same color. Since I really don't know how much is too much at this point, I'm also trying to press the color down but leave some white space so that there aren't big patches of color, so that it looks a little bit more like individual, almost splatters of color. Mixed media backgrounds are generally a little bit messy by nature. They're almost supposed to be messy, but every once in a while there will be a spot or a couple of spots that I don't like the look of. So since the background has gesso on it, I'm able to go in with a wet paper towel and clean those areas up a little bit. Now the background is dry, and I'm sprinkling some water on top of it and then rolling some paper towel on top of the water droplets, and that helps to lift up a tiny bit of the color, and it makes a cool water droplet effect that I really love. I love adding modeling paste to mixed media backgrounds. I think it adds such a cool effect and some really nice texture. I'm using Liquitex modeling paste. I'm using a metal palette knife and a stencil from Stamperia, and it's called Formato G. I liked this stencil and I thought it went well with the background because it's made of circles, but the circles are irregular. They're not in a geometric pattern. They're kind of randomly placed on the stencil. And I took this stencil out of the packaging and I was so surprised because it's so thin. I thought it might be a piece of paper. I'm really not sure what it is. It's the thinnest stencil I've ever used. I was able to wash all of the modeling paste off of the stencil with no damage to the stencil. So I'm guessing that it is probably made of a plastic material. It turns out there's nothing wrong with having a stencil that's extremely thin. I think it actually might be an advantage. This is the photo that I'm going to be using. It's a photo of both of my daughters. I'm mounting it on a scrap piece of black corrugated cardboard. And then I was thinking that I wanted to add some journaling to this layout, but I didn't want to add it on the front of the layout. So I made a little card that I placed the photo on top of, and that way I could just flip up my photo and write some journaling. It's nothing fancy, but I did want to have an opportunity to journal about this event. All of the pattern papers that I use on this layout are from my scraps. I have a different folder for each color scrap. So I took out my yellow folder and my black and white folder, and I found everything that I need in those folders. On the bottom of the layout, there's a strip that I found already punched, so I thought that would be perfect for the bottom of the layout since my area of color is a little bit further toward the top than toward the bottom. I also found a number of strips of yellow pattern paper. I have one that has stripes on it, one that is dotted, and one that has hearts on it, and I cut them to different lengths, and I'm using my scissors, and I know you're not supposed to use the part of the scissors that you cut with, but I have these old scissors, and I often forget about that, so I'm distressing the edges of them with my scissors, and I like distressing edges, especially on mixed media backgrounds. Something about the distressed edges and the stamped background kind of goes together in my mind. I'm layering those 3 strips, and you can see that I'm drawing little pencil lines where I'm going to cut the strips, and then I bring them back, do a little bit more distressing, and then I use my ATG adhesive and I attach that strip down to the bottom of the layout, and then I begin layering those 3 strips that I just cut and distressed together. And then the 2 horizontal strips that I have on the layout, those are again also scraps. I have a black and white dot, and then I have a yellow wood grained paper. I cut them 2 different lengths, and I layered the yellow on top of the black and white. And then as I layered the 3 strips together, I did some more distressing on the edges by bending them up a little bit. Now I'm happy with where everything is placed. I'm not going to attach anything down to the layout yet. I'm going to attach these pattern paper strips together, and then I'm going to attach my photo down to the strips. The only thing that's attached down to the layout right now is the strip at the bottom. As I was looking at the layout, I was thinking that I needed to add a touch of black to the vertical strips, so I used the same paper that I used to make the banner that's going horizontally, and I cut a thin strip. I wanted that strip to go between the dotted and the striped yellow papers, so I peeled up one of the strips of yellow paper a little bit and I tucked that in. And then I was thinking that the background could use a few black splatters. Now, as soon as I started putting down the splatters, I got a splatter that's kind of large on the upper left-hand side. And I didn't dislike it, but I thought I didn't want to have just one splatter like that. So I allowed the paint to splatter on the bottom right-hand side in a similar way, in a similar size, so that it wouldn't just be that one black splatter that was grabbing your attention. I really like to add photo corners to my layouts. I like to add that pop of color and bring it close to the photo. I'm using the same pattern papers that I used to make the strips, and I decided to place a different pattern in each corner. I love to add photo corners to my layouts. I like the way the photo corners bring a pop of color close to the photo. At first, I was going to have two different colors of photo corners and then put the matching photo corners on opposite corners. And then I changed my mind and I decided to use four different color photo corners, all yellow, of course, but all punched out of the pattern papers that I used on the rest of the layout. I noticed there were a couple of spots that I had stamping, and I thought that those areas would look better if I just put a dot of color on top of them. When the background was dry, it was time to attach down that photo cluster, so I covered the back with adhesive, and then I attached it down to the background. I don't add a lot of embellishments to this layout. I do add a lemon slice, first of all, because it's yellow, and also because I had a lemon slice in my soda, and you could see that in the picture, and I used to always order a Diet Coke with lemon, but the problem was that that lemon was way too bright, so I was thinking of Missy Whidden, who uses gesso for so many different purposes, and I added a little bit of white gesso to the lemon, and that toned the color down a little bit. I found a little sticker sheet by Basic Gray. It had a yellow circle on it, so I included that. And my daughter gave me a box of odds and ends, and there was a white button in it, so I placed that on the layout. And then I wanted to call this layout Sweet Magnolia. It was the name of a waitress that we had frequently, but I couldn't find just the right letters. I went through a lot of different black letters. I finally decided on these. These are made by Felicity Jane, and I tried a few different yellow letters and finally found these tiny letters by Pinkfresh Studio. Whenever I'm putting two fonts together, I like one of them to have more curvy lines and one of them to have straighter lines, and then I like there to be a fairly significant difference in size between the two. I don't want two that are almost the same size. I thought that those two fonts worked well together. I found that I had a set of clear stickers. These are Simple Stories Snap stickers from way back when, and I picked out a number of different sentiments. One says today rocks, one says oh yes, one says this is the life. So I found spots for those on the layout. As I was making the layout, I was thinking that I wanted there to be more of a visual separation between the background and the strips of paper. So I used a very thin strip of black and I put it to the right of the cluster of strips of paper, and I thought that would help to separate the background from the pattern papers. Now I'm adding some black enamel dots to the layout. I added 2 dots to the yellow banner, but I do end up taking those off. And then I added some very small enamel dots to each of the photo corners. And then I was thinking that I liked the way that black strip of paper looked on the right, so I decided to do the same thing on the left. I used my scissors to help me position that piece of paper. Then I took off those black enamel dots and I decided instead to put some yellow enamel dots on the larger black banner. And although I cannot tell you the manufacturer of most of the enamel dots in my stash, I do know that these are Queen and Company. I realized there was more than one sheet of black stickers in the pack that I had, so I found a sticker that I thought looked nice under the title. I thought that it helped to ground it a little bit. I decided to take away that torn piece of paper that was over the photo. The background of the paper was just a little bit too brownish and it didn't go with the rest of the layout, so I decided to switch it out for this black and white striped paper, and this was another scrap from my stash. I tore the edge and then I tucked it into place. I wanted to add some thread or twine to the button, so I tied a piece of black twine, and then I decided that I wanted to put the part that had the knot on it in the back, and that added a little bit of dimension that I hadn't really expected. The glossy accents, though, was a strong adhesive, and it did a good job holding that button in place. I added a heart at the bottom, but I thought that that heart was a little bit too big. It just kind of stood out a little bit too much to me. So I do end up switching that heart out for a smaller heart. And then I also added a very, very tiny heart next to the word sweet. And there was a little bit of a scratch in the sticker, so I used my magic marker and I colored it in. And that was the very last touch. And here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Please look in the description box where you'll find links to all of the other scrapbookers who are following along with this hop. I'm really looking forward to seeing what everybody created with the color yellow. I hope that you enjoyed this video and perhaps found it useful, and I hope that you'll join me again soon. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.